Well, all right. Hi there. I'm Lopen Lhamo, and let me get a little better picture for you. There we go. And here I am at Ngakchon Gatsal, the Happy Garden of Practitioners in Oakland, California. And today we're going to talk about death. And we've been talking for the last 2 weeks. The first 2 weeks ago, we talked about how to get your ducks in a row. If you have a bad diagnosis, and you know that over the time, the months ahead, at some point you're going to pass away. And then the last week we talked about the process. It's called, more or less corresponds to the stage of active dying, and the sort of maybe up to weeks before that, or the bodily changes that are going on and the inner signs that you're seeing. And we talked about some of the signs that hospice workers and medical people who studied the very last days of a human being's life. What are the physiological changes that are going on? What do you see psychologically going on, at least externally? Now, at that very end of life, people are very withdrawn generally into their own world. So that's in a situation where you know what's coming, not in a sudden death situation. So you aren't dialing into this program because you know that you're going to die in an hour. So I thought I'd go through some of that stuff. And this next period is an interesting one. We went all the way up through the breathing stopping, your breathing stopping. And if you're a practitioner, that's a good idea for anyone. You've done your best to try to maintain a state of calm and a state of peace, and a state of clarity as much as possible. Now, there may be pain, and there's nothing. Life and death are never everything. That doesn't always go the way we want, but it's not like you're going to fail some test or something. The idea is just to stay as relaxed as you can, be observant, have a sense of adventure. Like, did you see the movie Harold and Maude? Back when I was young, it was one of those movies that always played at the alternative theaters, that back when we had alternative theaters. Do you have an indie theater in your neck of the woods? I think we have one or two left in the Bay Area. Two I can think of. So that's the kind of place where they always show Harold and Maude, And Harold and Maude was a story about a romance, to put it very blandly, between an older woman and a young man. And spoiler alert, she dies. And at the very end, when she's going into, I don't know, the some kind of maybe back room where she was going to be most likely die with the doctor, she waved at Harold and said, "Harold, I'm off on a new adventure." So it may be, we're human beings and we may have all kinds of other feelings going on. But ideally, if we want to, we can aspire, if we are practitioners of Buddha Dharma, to stay as focused as possible, as calm as possible, have a sense of curiosity, and do our best to practice. And what practice looks like is probably the practice that you've been doing your whole life, that you love the most, that you really resonate with, that really brings you to a state of relaxation. At a minimum, a state of relaxation. So, anybody here with me today? If you are, throw some comment in the comment box. It is not the easiest topic in the world, but we're going to jump right in because there are people that are going to watch. I know there are some of you who are going to watch this afterwards, because it's a very, this particular interval right after the cessation of breath is very interesting. And both from a Western scientific point of view, and I am a family nurse practitioner by training, an RN, so I have a little bit of rusty knowledge in that area, and then also interesting to, from the point of view of sort of faith-based material we believe has credibility to us in the Tibetan Buddhist system. I don't think the other systems of Buddha Dharma really address the post breath cessation in as much detail as the Tibetan tradition. So let's get into it. Why do I keep saying the period when after your breath stops instead of saying when you die? Well, that's because it's not really when you die. It is one level of dying. In the Tibetan system, they refer to the outer respiration ceases, but the inner respiration is still going on. And in terms of Western medicine, I really recommend Parna. Oh, his first name will come to me. I've got it listed in the resources in the Livestream description. Parna's book on erasing death. He's a resuscitation doctor. He's not a Buddhist. But he's been very interested in the so-called near-death experiences. But he would call a lot of these actual death experiences. So people have, since he's resuscitating people for a living, a lot of people go into cardiac arrest, meaning your heart stops pumping. And their all activity, measurable activity in their brain ceases. So there's nothing on a EEG, nothing on EKG of the heart, nothing on an EEG of the brain. Flatlining, right? And you aren't breathing. Yet, that book's a bunch of years old now, probably 5 years old or more, and based on research that was done in the early 2000s through the mid 2000s. A small percentage of the people who flatline and are resuscitated, and we'll talk about that, come back to life, have these so-called actual death experiences, or they used to be called near-death experiences. And among them, a small percentage have the experience of like feeling like they're outside their body, they're looking down on what's going on in the room, they can hear everything that's going on, they claim to be able to remember things from that period from a vantage point. They'll say, I was up in the corner of the room and I was looking down, and sort of detached way at what people were doing to his body, and you realize it's you down there. That's a very small group of people, but significant in that you hear that story a lot. So this has become kind of well known, in pop culture, that there's this the usual scenario in our Western culture is dark tunnel, light at the end, something metaphorically like that, and a feeling of being loved and enveloped and free of pain, so there's a relief from the painful period of dying. I'm talking here not about Tibetan Buddhism, but about American pop culture, but it's based on collected stories mainly by, Raymond Moody was the famous scientist of the 60s, 70s, I'm going to say. I haven't really read his material directly, who collected these stories from people. And what else did they have? There's a sense of, there's sometimes a being of light there, or a being, benevolent being in different, this part is universal, meaning for people who have this kind of experience, they've seen this cross-culturally, not only in Western countries, but all in Asia and many different cultures. A guide after you die. So now I'm relating the kind of scientific, social scientific evidence that was gathered about this phenomena of having encounters and memories from the period during which your heart is stopped. Now, a lot of those near-death experiences, the person wasn't actually dead. But he has encountered a lot of people who actually died according to Western criteria, medical criteria, flatlining, and who have memories from that time. Internal ones, experiences they'd had, In fact, so much so that he set up several experiments where they put things like an iPad or a photo facing up on a surface, so that that the person couldn't have known about before they died, in the room where they were resuscitating people. So they just, I guess you'd have a. At first, he tried putting these in the room where he thought he'd be resuscitating people, and he did at various hospitals. And that turned out that, of course, people die all over the place, and they didn't really get it. Sometimes they weren't in the room where the room was set up. But anyway, having a picture facing up, so that if you really were a person, your consciousness was really separate from your body, which of course is outrageous from a Western materialistic point of view. It could look down and see the diagram or the whatever it was they had on there, word, whatever. And that has not panned out, because it's really, really rare that happens, that people have that experience, even though it's well known to occur in some people. And I won't give my speculation about that, why that's not so common, but why it is a thing. So what do we know? What have I said so far? A feeling of benevolence, love, and so forth. And the white, they call, you common, coming out of New Age thought. White light, go towards the white light, go. How they know what's at the end of that white light, I don't know, but this is the dark tunnel idea, and benevolent, brighter area at the top. So, interestingly, in the Tibetan literature about this time, I'm trying to go back and forth between compartments in my brain, the Western medical view, and which I know, and the Tibetan view, which I know. So I'm getting a little, at times it's like tilt. We used to have pinball machines where the ball would come down through the maze, and you would try to get it, hope with paddles and so forth it would go in the right place. And then, but if you literally picked up the machine and turned it, it would tilt, and then everything would stop, and you lost the money you put into it and all that. So sometimes my mind goes tilt when I'm trying to integrate different realities. So that specific scenario doesn't exist. We'll go through in a minute what the Tibetan Buddhist belief is about this immediate post-death period, where from the Tibetan medical Dharma point of view, the person is still alive on some level. Going back to the Western medicine view, where indeed people have been revived up to, this was midway through the 2000s, could be longer now, but there's one guy in Germany who was revived after 2.5 hours, flatlined, and he came back and had a normal life after that. He wasn't a vegetable. How do they do that? Is saying a vegetable wrong? I'm sorry. That's not very nice. So how do they do that these days? Well, first of all, they have machines that takes at really good hospitals and that are well funded as well as being good, with a lot of really well trained people and special equipment. If you happen to die right next to one of those and have a really good ambulance crew that was keeping your heart pumping manually and, getting oxygen in, getting air into you on the way to the hospital, and you get there really fast, immediately your heart is stopped. Immediately they would put you on a machine where a machine is doing the compressions that you see that the paramedics are doing on the body, keeping the blood circulating. And on top of that, they put you in a cooler. There's a cooling machine that lowers your body temperature to ideally 90 degrees. So that's 98.6 is the average human waking temperature, right? So this is almost 9 degrees cooler than you are when you're alive and functioning well. And they put you into a medically induced coma. And then that saves some time because the cells in the body are then on it as soon as the heart stops pumping. The cells in the body and brain are going to start breaking down, but like everything, every process, it slows down a lot when you have them cooled, and when the blood is circulating, the cells are still getting the oxygen and nutrients they need from the circulating blood, and obviously they're on a respirator. So very I don't know if it's lucky or not to have this done, honestly, looking at it. If you're a person that's in pretty good health, the guy in Germany was 53 or something, robust, and then there's a lot of ethical decisions that go into resuscitating somebody, especially doing this whole massive effort that takes dozens, if not hundreds, of people. That Dr. Parna said, because the whole medical system has to cooperate you, including funding and everything else. What a weird thing to talk about in a Dharma talk. Am I right? So, so then they can work on what they need to do to resuscitate you, to really get your heart beating again on its own, with a more time, right? So usually it's much more common somebody be revived 10 minutes, 20 minutes after they pass, and if they haven't had their haven't been refrigerated, basically, if they haven't had regular compressions either manually or by machine, then it's likely there's going to be brain damage there because the cells in the brain have started to break down. But anyway, it's a whole new world where resuscitation science is making vast leaps, and it's entirely possible they may be able to revive people under certain circumstances up to a day after they die. Isn't that spooky? In the future, not now. So then I as a Tibetan Buddhist nurse practitioner, find that I wonder about these traditional stages the post-dying experience according to Tibetan Buddhism, which is what we're going to get to now. So the stages after the outer respiration starts are so we've gone through the sort sort of coarse dissolution. The subtle dissolution, where everything comes down and ultimately your respiration, your breathing stops, and you're just breathing dissolves into your consciousness. And your consciousness, what does that mean? Well, here we're talking about your 5 senses and the sort of brain function. I'd like to learn, also coordinate between the Buddhist, I'm sure somebody's done this, but the traditional basic Buddhist understanding of the senses and modern understanding of how the senses really, materially operate in coordination with your brain, which is very interesting, brain science. And so consciousness is involved with your 5 senses, sense consciousness, they call it. Then your mental conscious, your thinking mind, and then your klesha mind, they call it. The karmic seeds operating, the stream called the alaya, or the ground of all, which is that one is where karma is operating, and is what we call, these together is what we call consciousness. And karma operating means I'm going like this because one deed, then the result, and the deed, cause and effect, cause and effect, cause and effect going on. And that that's what you are, this bundle, in your, as far as an I or an individual identity kind of idea. This is what you are, this little continuum that involves these consciousnesses. And the stream of consciousness that goes from one moment to a moment. And then, so what happens then is that continues, the consciousness gradually dissolves into space. And this takes place in sort of in a series of 3. And one is, first there's a white appearance in this process, immediately after death or soon after death, a kind of a white field, but white seems to be a sort of metaphorical color, having to do with your subtle anatomy, a level of detail we don't need to go into, like moonlight shining in a cloudless sky. Well, what would moonlight actually look like if you weren't looking at the moon? That's very subtle, that kind of white. And then after that, there's the conceptual mind dissolves. Anyway, a red light comes. Sorry, I'm losing my languaging there. A red field of vision comes, and that's like the sun shining in a cloudless sky. So it's a subtle difference, right? And now aggression has ceased, passion has ceased, and this is where you do your poa. So this is a practice you do here. If you're a relatively beginner person, or if you have some kind of emergency situation where you can't really do the full depth of your practice, there's this kind of a Hail Mary, metaphoric, like there's no Mary involved, move spiritually, called Nirmanakaya Poa. Actually, there's several poas, or transference of consciousness, that this is the point at which that is done. We'll come back to that very soon, because then after white, and then a red experience, and then black, field of black, and all your other aspects of thought cease. And it's completely dark, like a cloudless sky without sunlight. And then we faint. So all of that, very, not that hard to believe. Not hard to believe at all. From a Western medical point of view, they'd have a materialistic explanation for it all, and they've tried with the Western near-death experience phenomena. They've done a lot of theorizing, speculating, and some research trying to sort of reproduce those kind of experiences based on material, oxygen deprivation, chemical reactions in the body, endogenous, hallucinogenic type of chemicals we have naturally in our body, trying to explain it. But Parna, and I recommend you do read Erasing Death, argues that, makes a lot of counter arguments medically that makes him be unconvinced that these are solely physiological processes. But up to this point, you can think about it that way. It's not too far out, because there is some subtle consciousness going on. This is not so many people have a hard time believing that, even very materialistic people. In the 1 hour, 2 hours, depending on the heat in the room, how far your body is degraded, there's still some kind of consciousness there. People have taken brain cells out of a cadaver like 4 hours after death, and the brain cell still functions as a cell, still basically alive, and it can reproduce if you put it in a petri dish and do certain things to make it, to multiply it. So there's life after death, literally, for a while. And people are having various kinds of subjective experience during that time. So this is actually the end of the dying process from the Tibetan Buddhist perspective. That faint, that blacking out after, at this point, that's death. And that's not so. We can kind of agree on that. There is more. The Tibetan system goes on through, and we may talk about that next week. I'm not stopping, but I want to see if there's any questions. I got somebody on the line up there. Any questions or comments so far? And I want to talk about the POA, or transfer of consciousness, transferring of consciousness. So there's several systems of practice for the period this period after your outer breath has ceased and before you've blacked out, in that 2 hour window. And collectively, they're called transference of consciousness. Have you, if anybody out there wants to throw in the comment box whether they've done a retreat on the transference of consciousness. So the most common form of this is called a Nirmanakaya embodied. We'll transfer. We'll translate it. Nirmanakaya, kind of technical Buddhist term. In this case, is kind of an embodied, practical transference of consciousness. And the Nirmanakaya POA is a system that can be taught while you're alive, and it's very much encouraged for people, even if if they have faith in Tibetan Buddhism in general, they've taken refuge in the Buddha, Dharma, and Sangha, and so on. It's a really good idea to do a week-long retreat with a POA master, a lama or spiritual guide who's really accomplished at this practice themselves, and as a group do this practice, which involves visualization of your consciousness in the form of a sphere of light or in your heart, There's a channel. I'm not teaching you how to do it. I'm just giving you a general idea. There's a tubular channel that goes up from your heart, just below your heart, all the way to the crown of your head, and it's open on the top. And you have this opening here called the crown aperture. I'm forgetting the name of it in, maybe they call that, I can't remember if that's a Western term or a Tibetan term, but you know, in babies, that soft spot, right? It closes up in us. And the idea is that it's much more positive uh, in terms of your spiritual future if you can exit the body through this crown aperture, talking about things in a really simplistic way. So there's 9 apertures in the body, orifices in this system, and all of them lead to different kinds of rebirth in different realms. And if you keep focused when you're in the dying process, you're getting ready as you see yourself degenerating, and it comes time and your breath stops. And up until the point of the getting, at any point before you faint, so you want to during the white appearance or the red appearance, you can eject your consciousness. They use a sharp sound to do so, and you visualize representing your own awakening at the crown of your head, about a foot above the crown of your head, say, Buddha Amitabha or a similar figure that symbolizes to you complete awakening. So on a simplistic level, you're physically doing this thing. You're sending this ball out, and when you're practicing, you don't leave it up there, your consciousness. You're sending it up and bringing it down, sending it up, bringing it down when you're practicing. And you actually develop signs on the body from doing that. You'll get a seepage of a little serous fluid at your crown aperture. They can actually, there's a little opening there. They can actually take a piece of thin, stiff grass and gently put it in there, and it'll stand up on the top of your head. It's really an encouraging thing for people. It gives you confidence. So if you've done that at any point in your life, you can start, as you're approaching your final days, you can start rehearsing gently, just thinking that sphere of light going up, going down, going up. And Dzogchen Ponlop Rinpoche, in his book Mind Beyond Death, which is excellent, encourages people who are getting close to death to keeping their awareness or consciousness at this level or higher in those final moments. And then, so you're ready to send it out. So that's one form of poa, and there's a bunch of different poas. Another form of poa is visualizing your guru above your head, and without doing all the detailed visualizations and so forth that we do in the Nirmanakaya poa. It's just go up and merge your mind with your lama's mind above your head. Another one is called the Sambhogakaya. What are we going to call that? Enjoyment body poa. Body of perfect rapture, one translator likes to call it. So it's kind of visionary, joyful body. That Sambhogakaya poa is actually for people who've done deity practice during their lives. So Vajrayana practitioners sometimes specialize in practice of oneself as luminous, made of light, and the whole world is your mandala or sacred circle. So you're viewing yourself and everything purely and not as as originally pure from the beginning. So your whole field of experience, inner and outer, is through the use of the crutch of visualization. You can tune into your actual nature beyond the superficial. So for people who really, that's what they love, They don't need to do eject the consciousness because they already have transferred, so to speak, into that awareness of the primordial purity. Everything is divine, free of appearance emptiness. They'll say appearance emptiness. The realization appearance emptiness is like there isn't any real truly existing self, just like Vipassana, right? We've talked about that. In Vipassana, there's in the Theravadan tradition, definitely there's no self. In the Mahayana tradition, there's no self, and all these phenomena outside are illusory, like dreams. Then deity yoga helps you unify this view and really bring it into your own experience. The unity of shamatha and vipassana, many things could be called that. Anytime you recognize your own actual nature. So if you do that, if you can stay in that samadhi of your deity, then you don't need to eject. So saith Dzogchen Ponlop Rinpoche. And then, what's the other poa? Oh, that's a Pure Land poa. And that comes from having practiced dream yoga a lot in your life and during your life. And dream yoga, it's taught to a lot of people. Typically, it's taught to people who've done a lot of deity practice, and it's kind of one of the called completion stage practices of deity yoga. So you can read about this in Namkhai Norba's book about dream yoga, or many other books. So some people specialize in a lucid dreaming practice. It goes beyond the Western lucid dreaming practice, but it's based on the same principle as recognizing your dreams as dreams during your life. When you're dreaming, you know you're dreaming, and you're able to emanate more bodies, you can emanate 1,000 bodies and bring them back in. You can jump off a cliff and then raise yourself back up before you hit the ground. So you can master being able to control your dreams, for lack of a better word. And then you can fly off and receive teachings in the Pure Lands of various Buddhas. So Amitabha is famously, his Pure Land of Dewa Chen, Great Bliss. We've talked about that a lot. So Amitabha, Pure Land, Sukhavati, Dewa Chen, you could fly off to there and receive teachings from Amitabha personally. Or you could fly off to Guru Rinpoche's Pure Land, Zandok Pori, or Vajrasattva's Pure Land, Abharati. I hope you say it that way. And so on. Each Buddha has their own space and their own retinue and their own time and so forth. So this is the Pure Land practice, which involves this mastery of dream yoga, which honestly few people have. By learning how to do that in your dreams, now you can do that when you're dying, and then continue when you're in the post-death period. Isn't that cool? Cool idea. So actually, from our point of view in Tibetan Buddhism, there is no Dewa Chen outside of yourself. It's not a place. He's not a person. He's not looking and saying, "Oh, Yudrin, welcome." These all arise from your own basis, which is originally has all the qualities of a Buddha inherent. We are all the same, from the littlest insect up to an obvious Buddha. We're just, in some of us, like myself, it's just really, really hidden between veils and stupidity, aggression, desire and so forth. But if we peel back those veils, it's right there. And it's a very optimistic point of view. It could happen anytime. And there's 1,000 practices to make it so. So that's the Pure Land practice for those who've mastered Dream Yoga. The Pure Land dream transference, POA practice. So those are actually great. Ideally, though, after that faint, or for some very good yogis and yoginis practitioners, they won't black out. There's a period of reality itself, the true nature of everything, our own true nature arising, becoming evident, where that consciousness we talked about, or of our ordinary mind. Here I'm not using the word ordinary mind to refer to. That term is used in so many different ways, it's very hard to speak of it. But our unenlightened mind, those functions of our mind, have dissolved for a while, and you have this naked awareness there. And so that could be something we could discuss next week. If I have the courage and there's interest in it, I can discuss the Chini Bardo, or the Bardo of reality itself, Dharmata. But before then, since it's 45 minutes after the hour, I only can see one person here today, and I don't know if you want to practice or not with me, but maybe it would be good just to run through it. Maybe somebody, if those of you want to hang around who are watching later on, most people watch these videos after the fact, would like to run through this with me. Let's go back through from the beginning of what we've been talking about last week and this week. Okay, so how do we want to set things up if we, practice-wise, if we were planning to die? Of course. I'm planning to die, because it's going to happen whether I plan for it or not, right? So first of all, remember the advice of all the lamas, all the great masters, which is to have our motivation really be to benefit all sentient beings equally. That means every living thing. The point of our whole life and the point of our death is to develop ourselves so that we can really help. Because right now we don't know the nature of the ultimate truth of things. And the advice we give, the help we give may turn out well for somebody, or it may turn out to be something we thought was well-intentioned. It may turn out to be the worst thing we could have ever done for somebody, you know? That certainly happened to me, or the things we just don't really know because we haven't accessed our ultimate wisdom well. We're relying on thinking. Thinking is just going around in circles with our habits from countless lifetimes until now. It doesn't really have anything to do with reality. It's just the choo-choo train we're on. So make that bodhisattva intention as often as you can remember. Also make the intention, I'm going to acknowledge you're going to die sooner or later, and try to think sooner. You know, there's this thing that goes on with some of my dear friends that they could be right, but I don't think they're right. So my opinion is based on my ordinary deluded thought, mind you, is that this idea that by thinking positive, that you're going to live for so many years in good health, that will make you live until you're 100 in good health. And by never saying I'm old, somehow that will make you age more slowly. by never saying that I'm aging. And there's this idea in when people have cancer in particular, but any serious chronic illness that's terminal, when it is a terminal illness, of saying, I'm going to beat this. She was a fighter. She never gave up. I don't know if that really makes any difference for your longevity. I think there's a lot of other things. Going for a good walk every day probably does more for your longevity than not accepting that you're going to die, because if it doesn't accord with reality, if you're living in a fantasy world when you have a terminal illness, and it's much better, in my opinion, to really accept it. And what I see on I follow wonderful people on Twitter, and if you're dying or if you're a practitioner, I'd recommend looking around, for those people on Twitter and social media where you hang out who are readily acknowledge they're going to die. For example, there's one woman named Athlete on Chemo. I think her name is Suzanne, who's just like it sounds, an athlete who has metastatic cancer, and it's just getting worse and worse. But she doesn't believe in anything after death, so that blackout for her would be an eternal black box. But she puts so she really appreciates food. She's a really good cook, looks like, and flowers and the beauty of the day. For her, of course, as an athlete, going out for a run might be the thing. For me, as a lazy bumpkin, really enjoying a book or a song or, Dharma teaching might be, because everything's so vivid and present when you really acknowledge that you're going to pass. So my advice is to acknowledge when you're getting older, to acknowledge when you have cancer, to acknowledge that your time is finite. And then you can begin to make some decisions about how to die professionally, as I titled my last provocative title of my video, Amita Lhamo Rinpoche saying. So, say to yourself, I'm going to remain calm. I'm going to remain calm. I'm going to remain clear. And plan your last thought. If you have, many lamas are convinced that your very last thought, although obviously if we go on toward an ordinary rebirth, this is the sum total of our karma that is going to largely going to shape our future life. But many lamas believe that your last thought certainly shapes your bardo experience, if nothing else. It may not. I don't know if they really seriously think it shapes your rebirth. Because after all, the guys who flew the planes into the World Trade Center were certainly thinking, I'm going to Allah's Pure Land. And they didn't think they were angry, probably. They weren't aware of what they were really feeling and thinking. But clearly, this is not true. They're really deluded that killing people, harming thousands of people was really going to, cause a wonderful afterlife. That's absolutely cannot be true. And however, I think they're thinking about it kind of like people when they take LSD or other hallucinogens. How they talk about how people have bad trips if they're really in an insecure, negative space before they take the drug, and this is well known in those circles. And then I don't know if it's true or not. And then if you have a really relaxed, positive mind, a positive environment, good music playing and so forth, you have a nice trip. So maybe there's some truth in this. So we should think about what's Ponlop Rinpoche suggests, and I've heard this from other lamas, think about ahead of time, what do you want your last thought to be? So it can combine with your Dharma practice and be like, I want my last thought to be of my guru, or my spiritual mentor, or my spiritual friend. I want my last thought to be of Guru Rinpoche, or Amitabha, or the Buddha. And whatever, when you think that thought now, the one that makes you feel good, peace, kind, etc. So if we have identified the nature of our mind, meaning we're a Mahamudra or a Dzogchen practitioner, basically, there might be other traditions that do this, but I don't know about them, or Mahamudra, Dzogchen practitioner, we really identified. We can really rest, we have the knowledge of what our pristine consciousness is, untouched, primordially pure consciousness, level of consciousness, strata. Then we don't need to do po. So you really, if you become settled in that, certain of your true nature, and you've been able to stabilize that by continuing on in that state, then you'll just continue to do that all through the dying process, and it'll all be fantabulous. And then the next, if you haven't, then start thinking about the POA in the weeks and months that precede your passing, rehearsing it. You can look at your notes. You're not going to be able to look at your notes when you're in the dying process, that's for sure. Look at your notes, refine your visualization if you're doing Nirmanakaya POA. Okay? And so, let's go through in our last, let's go through for like 5 minutes. First, let's walk through a dying process. First, relax. Got some new sound effects. Let me see. Human sounds high 4. Okay. That. Can you hear that? Oh, it's muted. I can't unmute it. Okay. I think I've muted it for myself, and maybe not for you. Let's try again. The human's relaxation. Yes. Let's relax. Now we think of all sentient beings spread out in space, all of them, the fish and the gnats and the snakes and the beautiful elephants and the humans and the invisible beings. Maybe there are some. We know there are some, even scientifically, right? And we breathe in all their suffering in the form of heavy black soot-like air. And then breathe out open, spacious clarity. We make the resolution that we're going to use this Bardo experience, transitional state, the process of dying and its aftermath, to move towards complete awakening, Buddhahood, and so that we can have all our obscurations and everything completely purified naturally. And that way that really benefit beings without effortlessly, without having to try. We're just naturally able to do the right thing, and being around us wakes people up. Now we pick our first thought, our last thought. Decide, what do I really love the most? Of all those practices I've done, is there some image that encapsulates it all? Is it Buddha? Tara? Like that, whatever it is for us. Kuan Yin. And think about that being, or that ball of light, or whatever it is above your head. Feel that kindness and love that envelop both of you. Now, over the weeks leading up to our passing, if we have a warning, our body get heavier and heavier. Eventually we end up in bed. It's hard to move around. It's heavy. Our head is heavy. Sometimes people have to help us, pull us up in bed because we slip down under the covers. That's earth dissolving into water. Then we start being, our sort of waterworks themselves begin to be disrupted. We may feel thirsty. Our mouth may dry out. Our hearts have difficult to take in water. Or maybe water, liquid, is accumulating places in the body where it shouldn't be, leaving places where it should be. So we're dry. And people are brushing, taking little sponges on sticks, and they're dipping them in water, and they're wiping our lips to keep them moist. Maybe putting a little bit of Vaseline-like substance around to help you from drying out. And you're becoming so weak, it's really hard to. But you're staying calm. You're resolving in your mind, I'm going to stay calm. I'm going to stay clear. I'm curious about what's going to come up, and I'm going to stay present with this process. Doesn't matter if I'm on drugs. Whenever I'm awake, I'm going to attend to what's going on internally. So you were withdrawing your focus on the outward superficial stuff that's going on with your family, and there's time to give up that all up. And they're going to have to take care of themselves from now on. It's not your concern at all. So that's water dissolving into fire. Now your very body heat itself starts decreasing, and you're feeling chilly. Can't really get, even they put covers on you, maybe it's difficult to get cold, warm inside. You're on this sort of metabolism that keeps you warm is fading. The systems are resolving one at a time into the other next. And then that's called fire dissolves into wind. And so you're thinking, okay, the end is near. I can still breathe. But I've got to acknowledge this end is coming, so I want to keep that first thought in mind, thinking about Amitabha, thinking about Buddha above my head. If I'm going to do POA, just running through the exercise, and you actually find your focus is a lot clearer at this time, rather than being worse. Although there may be some problems at times of pain, you'll have to work with that. You'll have times when you can do really clearer than you ever have before. Focus on what's going on internally, because you've withdrawn all this distraction looking around externally, right? Then the breathing starts getting ragged, and this is called wind, process of wind dissolving into consciousness. So the wind is your outer respiration. Breaths are getting shorter. Maybe intervals are going along where you're not breathing, or maybe initially you're panting. Perhaps if you have pneumonia, that's what the cause is, maybe. They're probably giving you morphine to help you breathe easier, but that will shorten your life a little slightly. It'll make you more comfortable sometimes. And then the breath slows to 30 seconds, maybe up to a minute, and then like apnea. There may be that rattly thing going on, the death rattle. Just observe. You're going to stay calm because you have confidence in the Dharma teachings. And just going to watch what's going on. You're going to mind your practice, staying calm, clear, ready to do your po if that's what you're going to do. If you are a superior, I don't know, special practitioner, you really learn to blossomed your rigpa, your ability, your capacity to see, to know the actual nature of your mind, your basis, the true nature. You're resting in that consciousness and that awareness, that deep presence, bright awareness. Then breathing stops, and that's called wind dissolves into consciousness, and then you're just conscious and you're not breathing, and your heart stopping. Now Vajrayana people may experience visions of the mandalas and deities at this stage, early, when still in the dying process. When they see our deities, the mandalas, all this kind of stuff. Actually, before your breathing stops, as we talked about last week, there can be visions of your dead loved ones and that kind of thing. If we're a mix of an ordinary person and a Vajrayana practitioner, we might see a combination, who knows, of people we've loved and have passed on, this kind of group surrounding us. Or we could have negative visions if we've been a really hateful person. Our mind is shaped, unfortunately, by our thoughts and our habits and our deeds. So if we've been a really negative person, it's unlikely we're going to suddenly die smiling, right? So a continuation of that in this state is these visions you may see. If you've been praying to your guru, which would be normal for a Vajrayana practitioner, Buddhist practitioner, you may see a vision in this interim, after the breath stops, of your guru. You may also see a lamp or a torch, and this isn't what's called a clear light, just to clarify some confusion. It's called like an example luminosity. It's a not forewarning because it's positive, but this is a secret sign during this time, an deep inner experience. And if it's so, you attend to it and you rest in it. So imagine you're seeing like a candle or a little light. Just rest your mind in that. Then what we've been through today, is talking about the white light, like the moonlight. It's got a white luster to it. Encompasses our field of awareness. And that is actually the masculine energy. And also the aggression, habit of aggression dissipating. And then white masculine energy is coming down towards the heart. The red feminine energy then starts to ascend, and then you see a red vision. So somewhere in there, if you're doing your Manakaya Poa, you remember, and you say, yeah, now's the time. And you mentally say your syllable. This actually can happen really fast. So one of my friends heard someone after they passed saying with a little faint sound that sounded like they were doing their Poa practice. Isn't that beautiful? So you do your Poa practice, and you join the pure land of you merge with your teacher or the pure land or Buddhas, And then with those practices, you get an interim and a kind of luminous existence, and a perceiving yourself in a place with that's completely conducive to practice, really, and you can accomplish so much there. Not permanent, it's not Buddhahood, it's not complete awakening, but it's really helpful on the way. So that's really great if you can do that. But if you're still resting in the nature of your mind, white light and red light, and then dark and black field of vision. And most people, ordinary people who aren't practitioners, then faint and they have an experience of nothingness before, and that's a sneak preview. So let's sneak preview, I'll say. So then they're going to go into the bardo of becoming, the intertransitional state where they've taken on a kind of a immaterial body, and they are being drawn to various parents in all kinds of different existences, and based on their karmic seeds, that alaya vijnana that has been rekindled. And they're off to a new life within 7 weeks or so after they die, somewhere in that period, they say. So let's say now we're going to practice just seeing that, imagining what that clear, that white moonlight is like. And then the reddish light of the sun in the sky. And then blacking out. Black. So what if we can't do it? What if we can't do any of this stuff? We're just freaked out. It's okay. You made a minimum. You made the Bodhisattva aspiration, and through doing that, I read in Jigme Lingpa's Yunten Zo that you're guaranteed to someday. Might take many, 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 many lifetimes, but someday, just based on your aspiration, your genuine taking of the Bodhisattva vow, enlightenment is guaranteed. It's the slow path, but it's no big deal. It's fast, slow. So, and by doing all this positive stuff when you're dying, as much as you can, even you made these positive aspirations and so forth, thinking a little bit about Buddha or whatever your icon is. The experts say that's more likely to lead you to rebirth in a realm where you can practice in the future. So a human birth, there's some gods that can attain enlightenment in some systems. Demigods, gods, humans, those are the upper rebirths. So they're feeling generally a rebirth where things are going to go well for you in your ordinary life. Nothing to do with awakening, but it provides you with a platform. Ideally, human rebirth is great. Hopefully you're drawn to a human rebirth if you have to be reborn, and hopefully it's kind people. You're raised well and you get exposed to Dharma in your life. That's the idea from a Buddhist point of view. And then you can try again next time around and practice. So with that, I think we'll close. I ran way over. And thank you to the person who joined me for a while. Oh, you're still here, dear person. And I'm going to say good night. If you have any requests from me for future teachings, I do have a list. And if there's interest, I'll talk about the Chini Bardo, but it's quite a difficult topic. So if there's no interest, maybe not. So people who are watching this after the fact, let me know if you're interested. And if not, I might go on to some other topic next week. So thank you for joining me, and I'll see you next week. Bye-bye now.